Okay, so good evening. Um, fair bit to discuss. Fair bit to discuss, actually. A lot of topics. Now, I'm going to start with the Novak Djokovic situation because I honestly believe, with what has happened over in Australia with Novak Djokovic, it's actually going to have far wider implications, both politically, which is a discussion for the other channel, and also in a sporting context in Australia, and I think globally, because it sets a precedent. Okay, now Djokovic is openly unvaccinated. He's against vaccination. Now, he also did admit to breaching COVID lockdown restrictions when he had tested positive. Now, the legal argument that the Australian government has is that he didn't declare everything on his visa form. Now, the legal side of it is a mess, and I could discuss that on the other channel, but it's been settled for now. However, the damage it's done to tennis, Djokovic, the Australian government, the state government of Victoria, you name it, the damage done to all parties is, I think, there. I think it's been handled very, very badly by all concerned. And so, we could discuss that on live stream on the other channel. In a sporting context, because in Australia there are still restrictions in crossing state and territory boundaries, which will impact the NRL, the 8 Supercars, the AFL, the A League, the Australian Ice Hockey League. There are several, major and minor sports that are played in all territories and states in Australia. It may also impact the Trans-Tasman corridor between Australia and New Zealand. Now, there's a question mark about the New Zealand Warriors. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be able to play any games at Mount Smart this year? When will they be able to play games at home in New Zealand and Auckland? Could it become to the point where hosting them on the Central Coast becomes so expensive for the NRL that they end up having to be relocated? But each state has its own exemptions and rules when it comes to COVID protocols, and therefore the Novak Djokovic situation does pose some questions, considering the amount of Australian citizens and nationals and residents, so those who have Australian residency but not necessarily citizenship, who are stuck overseas who cannot return home for a variety of reasons because the federal government has such strict travel rules in place right now. It will be interesting to see what concessions the NRL and AFL, for example, have to give to state and territory governments in order for protocols to be made and met. And also, there's the debate right now with some NRL players not being very happy with the restrictions they are being told they have to follow by the NRL in regards to socialising outside of the game. Now, while some of their complaints are valid, and you got the player welfare side of it with mental health and such. What we've seen in the last couple of seasons is players cannot behave themselves. I think Barbecue Gate would be a prime example of players just flouting the rules, even when their own team told them to behave themselves, they couldn't. And then what we saw with Cameron Munster and Brandon Smith, the video emerging through the final series of them partying rather hard with suspicious substances of a drug nature. Players can't behave themselves when they've been told to follow rules. So there's some criticism from some of the players, and the players' union are saying, well, we'll come up with some proposals to tweak some of these proposals that the NRL has laid down and such. So the Novak Djokovic situation does impact other leagues, other sports. It'll be very interesting. But he's not the only tennis player to face visa problems when it comes to the Australian Open. There are other tennis players who are unvaccinated. There are other tennis players who've got issues. There's a female tennis player who's been deported from Australia. I think it's again to do with vaccination status and visa status issues. So Djokovic is not the only player to face challenges with the Australian Open. But at this time, there's a run-up to a general election in Australia. So there's a bit of political subplot to that. On the football side of things, with watching the FA Cup, I still haven't got around to doing our fourth round draw video, but it is a very interesting draw, um, and with some managers under a lot of pressure following results from the third round. Mikel Arteta at Arsenal and the Reading manager, whose name just passes me by, are both under severe pressure after embarrassing defeats to lower league opposition. Although Nottingham Forest are not a bad side, they're in form in the Championship. But Arsenal's performance at the weekend was shocking. Reading followed up their defeat to Kidderminster with a 7-0 thumping by Fulham, with 5 goals coming in the last 25 minutes or so, or half hour or so of the second half. A complete collapse by Reading. A lot of pressure on Reading. They are fourth bottom in the Championship. The only reason why they're not lower is because Derby County have had their points deductions. So that's why Reading are not in the relegation zone. If Derby didn't have their points deductions, they'll be mid-table. So there is that subplot. So there's a lot of pressure on the Reading coaching team and the ownership because they are in dire trouble. They've had a points deduction as well, but even so, their form is atrocious. And a 7-0 thumping following up from the cup defeat to Kidderminster is not a good look. Newcastle, again, another embarrassing early FA Cup exit. It doesn't matter who owns the club; they just cannot get a decent cup run together. In recent years, it's just third or fourth round at best. Normally the third round, and Newcastle are out again to lower league opposition at the first hurdle, basically. So it'll be interesting to see who else Newcastle sign in this transfer window, which has been a very suppressed transfer window at the moment. There's a couple of major moves happening, not as busy as I would have expected or hoped at this stage in the transfer window. We're halfway through it. Not as many moves as I thought there would be. Villa have signed Digne from Everton for, I think, 25 million, and there's some interest in a Villa player going the other way. So that's one big move that's happened. Rafa Benitez is under pressure at Everton anyway. So again, this is a very important transfer window for the Toffees. Villa, they can take a lot of positives out of that performance against Man United at Old Trafford, but their record against Old Trafford in recent years is diabolically poor. They've only won twice in 20 odd years against Manchester United at Old Trafford, even when Manchester United are an appalling team right now, and how they're seventh in the Premier League is beyond me. I think with the way they've been playing, they should be far lower down the table. And Villa, Villa, at the other night did not look like a team in 13th. They looked like a team that was playing higher in the league, a bit more form. But that's 3 in a row Villa have now lost. They're going through a little bit of a sticky patch, but they have definitely performed a lot better under Gerrard than Dean Smith. I think a fresh voice in the dressing room was needed there, and I think they are better off than where they were last season as well. So Gerrard's made an improvement. I've not been watching the Africa Cup of Nations. To be honest, work is taking a priority at the moment, and there's a lot happening at work. We're very short-staffed at work, so I'm not doing videos every day like I want to. Although I'm going to book some time off work. I think I've got some holiday to use up while I'm still a contractor before I go full time. I've got a fair bit of holiday that I've acquired, so I might take a few days off and get some content up on the channel. There's a few video ideas that I've got floating around in my head. I've got to do my NRL season preview. I'm gonna do that in one video. It might be a half-hour video. It might be a 10-minute video. I might do it short and sweet. But I think there's a lot resting on this NRL season. It's the last season of 16 teams. There's already, and we're going to see how this season plays out. There are some players who are off contract at the end of the year. Obviously, we've got the Dolphins joining, so there's going to be a lot of players putting themselves in the shop window for there's going to be a lot of player movement in 2023, basically, or for the 2023 season. I can see more players signing for new clubs next year, or Redcliffe next year. And there's speculation about several high-profile players in the NRL where they're going to end up this time in 12 months' time, which is which is a nice thing to discuss. This has been a very quiet off-season by NRL standards for player behaviour, which is a surprise. I'm not. I don't know how the restrictions are going in Australia right now when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic. There's still a lot of restrictions in all the states. Each state and territory has its own restrictions in place, which is highly frustrating. I find that they just don't have a universal system in place. But it's a federation, it's a federal, it's Australian federation, because it's a federated country. Um, so yeah, each state and territory has its own parliament, has its own laws. But we'll see what happens with the NRL. I'm expecting a lot of players off contract to either sign extensions, but for less money than people expect. And there's going to be a lot of player movement because the Dolphins are coming in. There's going to be a fair bit of shifting around, and we'll also wait to see what happens with further expansion because you need to have an even team league. A 17-team league doesn't work, which means the next TV deal is going to be worth that little bit extra money. So we'll see what happens. But obviously, the NRL is keeping an eye on current developments with the pandemic. And it will be interesting to see again what protocols have to be put in place because the NRL has come forward with a proposal of what players can and can't do away from the game to avoid games getting cancelled and high infection rates. And the players aren't happy with it. So we'll see how that plays out with the Players Association and other bits and pieces. But it's going to be interesting. I can see the West Tigers possibly getting the wooden spoon, quite frankly. And I feel sorry for Michael Maguire there because he is a championship winning coach. He's a world class coach. He's won both here in the Super League and over in the NRL. And what's happened at the West Tigers is just baffling how bad they are with some of their recruitment decisions, some of the contracts they've signed, some of the players they've let go. Some of the discipline problems they've had with players. The West Tigers. I mean, there are calls to separate, Western suburbs, the Magpies and the Balmain Tigers, and have one of those teams be the 18th team, or literally just be the reserve grade club for the senior club. There's calls to move the West Tigers as an organisation and set up a new club elsewhere. The West Tigers is just a basket case of an organisation, and it is surprising with the talent they produced. Some of the players who have played for the club, the history of both the Magpies and then the Tigers as the dual venture and all that. It does make you wonder how much longer they can go without finals football. And it is a shame. It is a shame. So we'll see what happens there. In rugby union news, there's some very disturbing news and reports coming out that I just read that a player has been arrested under suspicion of sexual assault or rape, and a female has also been arrested in conjunction with that. A complaint was made over the weekend, so there's some very serious allegations against a current international player. Current being the word, so obviously no one's been charged with any offence, so therefore they can't be named. They're under investigation, but they are some very serious allegations, and quite worrying. I was, you always hope rugby union, which does have a better reputation off the field than association football, soccer, or rugby league. However, for some reason, major sports in the last couple of years have been beset by scandals like this, player misbehaviour, criminality. Normally it's the football players in the UK screwing up, but if it's a rugby, the allegations, the article I've read is very brief. But an arrest has been made, released without charge, but on bail. So there's an investigation ongoing into the allegations. It's quite worrying, and apparently it's a high-profile international player with England. So, watch this space. What I find interesting, if that was football, that would have massively blown up with what's happened, obviously, with Benjamin Mendy and previously with other players like Adam Johnson and all that. There would be a far more speculation over the identity of the player or players involved, what club they play for, etc., etc. And we've seen a lot of trial by social media, and in some cases, false allegations being put on social media that have actually affected investigations that the police are looking into. We've seen trials, we've seen players do all sorts of stupid things, getting involved in doing stupid things, normally with a bit of drugs and alcohol, but sexual offences is something completely on another level. What are my thoughts on France hosting the 2025 Rugby League World Cup? Back-to-back World Cups in Europe is an important thing. The French government have come out and sort of issued a weakly worded apology about what happened during World War II in regards to rugby league and the seizure of assets, which the French Rugby League and the clubs have never, ever been fully compensated for properly. And so, but there's a lot of lingering issues in French society when it comes to the 1939 to 1945 VAT period, with the collaborationists, members of French society, and those who resisted occupation and the Vichy government. There's a lot of wounds within French society in regards, and rugby league. If you played rugby league, that was a concentration camp offence. It really was. You could be deported from your town or village, sent to a forced labour camp in Germany or in northern France building the Atlantic Wall. You could be forcibly taken away from your home if you were caught playing. They took everything. But in regards to France hosting it, it is brilliant news. Well, with Toulouse getting promoted to the Super League, Catalan obviously not that long ago winning the Challenge Cup a couple of years back and getting to a grand final. It is very, very important. But we also need to get this World Cup played. Yeah. So it's all well and good saying they've got the hosting rights for 3 years' time, but we've got to get this World Cup played. Yeah, I've always been highly critical of rugby league in this country and how it's governed. I've got nothing against the players who play the game, the fans who support the game, and of course, same with the NRL as well. But the governance side of rugby league is really lacking behind the governance side in rugby union, for example, in expanding the game, growing the game. Um, the TV rights deal that's currently in place, the old TV rights deal, should I say, the current TV deal we're going to come into. I think they should have had at least one home game for each team in the Super League and one away game for each club, which I think would have really helped massively. It'll be interesting to see the TV rights for that 2025 World Cup because it is a European-based World Cup, so the time zone difference, will the BBC or ITV or Channel 4, for example, as they've now got the Super League rights, will they bid for the rights to host every game? Because this current World Cup, which we're hoping takes place this year and does not get postponed again or completely cancelled, the BBC have got sole rights to every single game. So every single game is live, free to air, which is vital. So it'll be interesting to see the TV rights and who gets what in the UK and then also overseas, because the game needs to grow more globally. And this is why this World Cup with Greece and Jamaica being debutants is crucial. And obviously the qualification process for France in 3 years' time, it'll be interesting if there's any again new nations that make it, or some nations that haven't been at the World Cup for a while, like South Africa, for example, which is obviously a rugby union and cricket heartland. They have played at a rugby league World Cup before. It might be nice seeing South Africa, put a team together and a rugby league program in place. That I think could be a massive positive because South Africa just produces athletes in so many sports, be it Olympic sports, cricket, even football. Rugby union. It would be nice to see a rugby league team from South Africa in the World Cup again. Hasn't happened for 22 years, but that could be something. But in comparison to the way the game's governed, there's obviously issues here in the UK. And as I said, the French government, President Macron coming out and saying, we acknowledge what happened in the war. They didn't actually officially issue an apology to French Rugby League and the rugby league clubs that were, destroyed, basically. And if we're talking about adding inflation and the damage done, we're talking a massive settlement should the French government be brave enough to pay out. And there's a reason why, France is not the powerhouse it should be. And it's taken all this time. That'll be 80 years since the end of World War II when they actually finally get to host the tournament. That is just something that I don't think people realise the damage done socially, damage done to the communities, and you can't fix that overnight. But growth in the game in France in the last 20 years has been good. It's been positive. It's going in the right direction. It would be nice to see more professional clubs in France playing at a decent higher level. There are professional clubs in France outside of Catalan and Toulouse. It would be nice to see like a really healthy, thriving professional league in France that could rival the French Rugby Union for fandom and participation and quality. Because I think long term, I would like to see a separate French league from the Super League system, and then the Super League winners play the French league winners. That could happen in 20, 30 years. It may happen. It may not happen in my lifetime. It could do. I would rather see a strong domestic French league that rivals the Super League and the NRL rather than the best teams in France playing in the English system. That's my personal opinion. Because the talent, the production line that French rugby, both codes has, is there. It's about trying to attract more kids playing league in France, and that World Cup has a massive chance to really cause the game to explode over there, massively explode, and it could reach a new generation of fans and kids wanting to play the game. And hopefully by that stage, Toulouse and Catalan have really established, well, Toulouse especially established themselves in the Super League. They're competing in the Challenge Cup. Catalan might win the Challenge Cup again. I think that could definitely also help massively reach a wider audience in metropolitan France, in the big cities like Lyon and Paris, and Lille and Marseille, outside of the traditional southwest location around Toulouse and Bordeaux and Perpignan, because then once you get the big cities in the east and the north and the southwest and the southeast, sorry, then you really hit something if you hit big metropolitan France, and then that could be a massive driving force into investment within French sport and growing the game. But it's a very interesting question. My thoughts on France. I think it has the opportunity to massively springboard the game to a much wider audience and grow the game, which internationally rugby league is lagging behind other sports. Even other sports internationally are far ahead of rugby league, and it's a shame because I think rugby league is a great sport for TV. It's a great sport to watch as a fan in the stadium, but money issues have dogged the sport for a long time. Getting enough kids playing the sport at school or at grassroots clubs has dogged the game for a long time. Even Australia claims it's the NRL, National Rugby League, doesn't have any professional NRL teams in Western Australia, South Australia, Tassie, one professional NRL team in Victoria. So you can see where I'm getting at. To call themselves a National Rugby League when it's East Coast centric is just a misnomer. And they missed a trick, I think, with the Dolphins, where they could have looked at Adelaide, another team in Greater Brisbane, in a different area of Queensland. Maybe another team in Victoria, maybe Geelong or something. There are other options on the table to try and take it to the AFL, but and the Super League, there's massive financial issues with the Super League and the RFL. I mean, they already had to take emergency loans from the British government to get through 2020. The Toronto Wolfpack collapsed. The Ottawa Aces relocating for a second time, back to the UK, and I think to the wrong location in England. It would have been nice to see them probably in the home counties or the Midlands, where there's more money, better transport links to the north, and I think they completely chose the Cornwall. I don't think that's going to work long term. I think they are going to move again, and that level of instability is going to prove a problem, a massive problem in my view. Growing the game in non-traditional locations, outside the north of England. It's a debate being had in Australia and over here about where to expand next, how to grow the game. And the people in charge, well, the NRL, I think, have done it better. They've not done it great, in my opinion. They've done it better than the RFL and Super League, but they haven't done it as well as they could have. And they have been naive in some of their choices, and the dual venture clubs, for example, they're not working effectively. And I know that Manly failed. St George has not been as competitive as they should have been, and the West Tigers has just been a basket case for most of their existing site. Some of the decision making with the NRL, you are left scratching your head. In regards to the FA Cup fourth round and the fixture congestion that football is facing, not just in England, but also in Europe as well, with the World Cup and such. It's going to be very interesting to see how they pencil these rearranged fixtures that have been cancelled, partly because of the weather, because we had some bad weather obviously before Christmas, and COVID. It's going to be very interesting to see how the FA, the Football League, the Premier League, the European leagues as well, how they manage to refixture games. Because I can see the Champions League and Europa League and Europa Conference League getting impacted by COVID in the coming weeks when the knockout stages get going. I can see some issues there. I can see a lot of issues with the top flight leagues domestically, with rearranging of fixtures. I'm also surprised that every single FA Cup third round tie took place. The FA were very insistent that all games get played, which I found very interesting. And the amount of teams fielding weakened teams, not because they just were fielding a weakened team because they can, because they had no choice. That really shocked me. The youth on some of the squads put out. Arsenal's team very young. Man City's bench was very young against Swindon. The amount of players not available for selection including the Africa Cup of Nations in that. The amount of players not available. Um, with the World Cup being played when it is having an impact. Um, it's going to impact next season as well. We know that, but the 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 situation that clubs are facing, and my club's been affected by the opposition cancelling because they couldn't not only not have enough first team players, they didn't have enough youth team players to put into the first team because they had a massive outbreak. Um, and there are it, it is a mess, and I don't know how um, you know, uh, the FA, the Football League, the Premier League here in England, the Scottish League as well, the Scottish League system, how they're going to get all these games that have been called off and postponed, um, refixtures. It's going to be a nightmare. It was already a nightmare at the beginning of the season with the World Cup and shoehorning all these fixtures in. It's going to be more carnage in the next month or so. It's going to be really chaotic, and then we'll have to see what happens in a couple of weeks' time in February when the FA Cup fourth round comes along, because we know there's going to be no more replays this season. So Barrows, which could be the last FA Cup replay we ever see, um, and we just have to see how it all plays out. We have to play it by ear. But I do think mistakes have been made this season with some of the fixturing, which they should have learned from last season. Um, I don't think the Premier League and the EFL will get to the point where, like the National League, where Dover Athletic couldn't complete the season. I don't think they'll allow that to happen. There is too much money on the line. And what's really interesting is Bayern Munich were the only team in the Champions League who recorded a profit um, in the top 5 leagues in Europe last season. So, while the season before it was Chelsea, now it's Bayern who are recording. There's only a handful of teams that are breaking even. So that could also explain why the transfer window has been a little bit subdued. Is that news coming out that Bayern Munich officially, with released figures, are the only club so far that made a profit last season in the top 5 or 6 European leagues that play in UEFA sanctioned competitions. That is worrying. And yes, there's more fan involvement in German football, but that is exceptionally worrying. The season before it was Chelsea out of the 12 Super League clubs, so there's definitely issues in regards to football's finances. Whereas a couple of years before, clubs were claiming they could let us in for free or very little money. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Obviously, they were cooking the books, and fans in attendance is far more vital than the clubs cared to admit at the time. And they still don't officially admit how vital we as fans of the sport actually are, being in attendance at grounds, at games, buying merchandise, buying, you know, food and drink, spending money. Because do you think the gap at the top and bottom of English footy leagues is getting bigger? I wouldn't necessarily say so. Looking at some of the FA Cup games, um, so far this season that I've watched, where there's a clear gap in the leagues, where it's a League One or League Two club playing a non-league club, or a League One or League Two club playing, let's say, a National League. or a Premier League versus Championship. I don't think the gap is as big as some of the clubs would like. I don't think the gap is as big as it is through the leagues, because there are players playing in the lower divisions who could play higher up. I've said that almost pretty much with every match review I've done, pretty much, where there's a league difference where a lower league club is playing against a higher league opposition. Or even when there's two teams in the same division, I've always stated I do think this player could be playing at a higher level. But yes, I think there is a quality gap. Obviously, you've got more money to spend the further up the pyramid you are. It's the same in all leagues. Bigger clubs tend to have bigger fan bases, more spending power, more pulling power as well for players who want to, go to a bigger club. It's very rare that you get a guy playing his entire career at the same club. Very, very rare that happens these days. Loyalty is a hard thing to come by. Even the great Messi has obviously left Barcelona, which he claimed he would never do. So players playing their entire career at one club is a rarity these days. It used to be quite common where a player like Mark Noble has technically been out on loan at two separate clubs. He hasn't played every single game in his career at West Ham, but he's been a West Ham player for his entire career. That's why he's called Mr. West Ham. Um, you know, it is very rare for a player to do that. I think Ryan Giggs is one, Gary Neville's another. But Michael Owen, Liverpool through and through, ends up playing for Man United, Real Madrid, Stoke. He towards the end of his career, moved around a little bit, didn't spend his entire career at Liverpool. Gerrard actually went to LA Galaxy, and so therefore didn't play his entire career at Liverpool. So yeah, it is one of them where I think players move around a lot more now. And I do think there are some really good quality players playing in the Championship, League One, League Two, and even the non-league who can play at a league above or two leagues above. There's definitely that talent there. It's getting that talent evenly distributed and giving the support to all clubs to have their own youth systems where they're developing at the same level, and growing. But what I've seen on the comment section, say for Reading, for example, of their 7-0 defeat, is the fit and proper persons test isn't working. Some of the dodgy owners we have in the game, the call for more fan ownership stakes in clubs, sort of like the German model. They are just one-offs, but I do think I do think that even though it's one-off games, the Nottingham Forest Arsenal game, a lot of those Arsenal players have had a fair run in the Arsenal side. So it's not as if like they were all inexperienced at Premier League level. They were a young side, but they played a lot of games together as a unit. And Nottingham Forest, where they were at the start of the season, they were relegation fodder. So Nottingham Forest and Arsenal both have had mixed seasons. But recent form would suggest, Nottingham Forest are trying a playoff push. Arsenal want to get back into Europe. The effort was lacking. Age has got nothing to do with it. The effort was lacking there. Man United against Villa. Villa deserved to win that game 3 or 4-1. And Man United had a bit of rub of the green with the VAR. The debate's 50-50 on that one. Well, you could argue, yes, the goal should be disallowed for the obstruction of Cavani, or no, I don't think it actually impacts Cavani defensively because he's not going to close down the cross or get into that area of the box where the ball ends up. So you could argue that. I do think, some cup matches, they are a one-off. Form does go out the window. But when you are, a Kidderminster Harriers who are 6 divisions below, they're in the 6th tier, 5 divisions below Reading, and they convincingly outplayed. There are part-timers in that team. It does say to me that the talent pool is growing, and the fact that Morecambe were leading Tottenham until like the 80th minute. Liverpool had to come from behind against Shrewsbury. These clubs in the low leagues are also facing squad issue problems, depth problems, because they're running out of players. Which is why I'm surprised the FA Cup third round went ahead and no games were cancelled. It did surprise me. But there is some good quality in the lower leagues and the non-league. There is some good football being played. There's some really skilled players playing in the lower divisions. I think a healthy, vibrant football pyramid is vital. And the Berry situation and what happened with Berry was a warning sign that clubs start folding. And you have. I don't think many fans realise how close we were to losing so many clubs um, in the last 2 years since Berry. The last 2.5 years, there was a lot more. There's a lot more clubs struggling financially. I don't think a lot of fans realise the precarious situation that clubs are finding themselves in, and even Premier League clubs are having financial issues. And you know, I don't think all fans realise how precarious some of the situations are throughout the league structure. And it's not just an English league structure problem. I think that is across Europe. I mean, Dynamo Dresden nearly went bust during COVID a year or so ago. The fans basically bought virtual tickets for a game that wasn't played and donated money to keep the club going. And they're a passionate fan base. Um, you know, uh, it, how is Reading doing? Well, Reading is the nearest profession. Reading and Maidenhead are the two nearest professional clubs to where I live. Reading have off field issues. They've been deducted 6 points this season. They're fourth bottom in the Championship. They got battered 7-0 last night by Fulham. And Fulham have been in a bit of wobbly bit of form because my team Blackburn are now, third in the Championship. This time yesterday we were second in the Championship. We played one more game than Fulham. It's very, very close between the top three, between Bournemouth, Fulham, and ourselves. So I think that could go down to the last day of the season with the two automatic places and the playoffs. Reading have got off-field dramas. They've been in breach of spending rules. They've had a points deduction. They're fourth bottom. The only reason why they're fourth bottom and not third bottom is Derby have had all their points deductions. Derby would be above them without those point deductions by a fair few points. It would be mid-table, to be fair, with their record. So, Reading are in trouble. Really poor ownership. Derby are in serious, serious trouble. They're facing liquidation and going completely out of business. I don't think the Football League will allow that to happen. Um, they won't allow another Bury to happen. Not with a club as high profile as Derby County, who've been a Premier League club, being the old Division One champions in years past. I don't think they allow that to happen. However, it's going to be an interesting 6 months with Derby. It'll be interesting to see if they actually do have the ability to field a team come the beginning of next season, if they actually are still a club at the beginning of next season. Um, However, with their form and the way they're playing, I think they could play themselves out of the bottom three. I mean, it would be a miracle, but I think they are capable of doing it because there are clubs above them who are in free. I mean, Barnsley have only won two games all season, so in the league. So it is very doable that they overtake Barnsley. If Reading continue to nosedive like they are, they could, if they're playing the way they are, with the amount of games they've got left, in theory they can get themselves out. It's going to be very, very difficult with being 11 points from safety, but it is doable in a sense for Derby. Um, Saying that, 3 wins for Derby completely changed the situation. That's 9 points. Though, in theory, if Reading keep losing, and the two teams above, including Barnsley, keep losing and not winning any games, and Derby win the next three, they're 2 points from safety. So, yes, Derby's position, they can get out of it. It may not take a miracle. It takes a few things going their way, and the teams around them just going on long losing streaks. They've got to beat the teams around them as well. But I think Derby can get out of their situation. Reading, there's a lot going on at Reading. I'm not fully in tune with everything that's happening with Reading, but they have been fined. They have been docked points. They breached financial spending rules, so they're making a lot of losses right now. Um, there's a lot going on at Reading. Maidenhead United, they haven't kicked on to get to League Two. They're still in the National League. They're not doing as well as they have done in previous seasons. And I think COVID's had an impact on that. But they're doing more solidly than what they were before. Other clubs like Swindon Town, which is not too far from where I live. I mean, get a train there and buy a ticket, for example, for a weekend game if I really wanted to. They only went out of business in the summer. So some of the professional clubs near me are struggling financially. Swindon was saved at the last minute, but they were hours away from going out of business before the season started. So yeah, there are issues in professional football in England. Um, it depends what club you're looking at. Um, Southend United have got money problems. That's the other side of London for me, but I can get to Southend within like 4 hours, 3 hours. Just means going through London. Um, but I could quite easily get to Southend within 3 hours. But there is issues. I think the majority of clubs have made losses in the last 2 years. Some more than others. Um, some of that is not even to do with COVID. Real bad overspend, reckless financial management, really poor governance by the EFL, the FA, and the Premier League. Because if they were to properly enforce their spending rules, 60 to 80% of the clubs, depending on which rules are enforced, would be docked points and fined, and you can't have that. Can't be allowed. So they've got to make examples of certain clubs. Um, but up and down the Football League structure and the Premier League structure, clubs are bleeding money. We'll see what happens going forward. I mean, crowd restrictions are due to end in Scotland in the coming week or two. So fans will be allowed back into stadiums in Scotland, which is going to be a massive shot in the arm for football, rugby union, and ice hockey, because ice hockey especially is heavily reliant on fans in attendance. Rugby union is heavily reliant on fans in attendance because their TV deals are nowhere near the same value as obviously football. And the Scottish TV deal isn't great for the SPL in comparison to the Championship in England, for example, money wise. So yeah, fans in attendance is vital for Scottish football. Having fans back there is crucial. But Scottish sport is more reliant on match going fans for a lot of its income. The TV deals aren't anywhere near as valuable. So you have that to bear in mind in regards to Scotland. Wales, that's a mixed bag because a lot of the Welsh football teams play in the English league structure. Rugby union wise, there's been money problems before COVID when it comes to rugby union and rugby league in Wales. The two codes of rugby, there are a lot of financial struggles there and have been for years. Ice hockey is only one professional team. That's Cardiff, the Cardiff Devils, and there's a couple of semi-pro teams that also participate in the British league structure, but again heavily reliant on match-going fans. So there's a lot of sports that with restrictions and what's going on and games getting postponed and cancelled. The mess financially is it's taking a toll, and teams could definitely go out of business. That is a fear that I had from the beginning in March 2 years ago. Was that it's the sports will survive. It's how many teams don't. How many teams don't survive? We've already lost the Toronto Wolfpack in rugby league. That was a flawed concept, I believe, to begin with, financially, with how rugby league is at in the UK financially, and the way that expansion was dealt with and how the RFL and Super League went around doing it was poor. Um, they need to get their own house in order domestically before looking at growing the game overseas. That there are massive pressing issues domestically before they can have vanity projects like that. 6-7 years down the line, this is where we are. Team's gone bust. So Bury going out of business again before COVID. But there are a whole host of football clubs, rugby union clubs, rugby league clubs, ice hockey clubs, really financially in difficulty, and really struggling. And how vital it is for match going fans to go to games is cannot be understated. Even though the football TV deal in this country is worth billions, the money isn't evenly distributed between the leagues like it used to be. The distribution is heavily weighted to the Premier League. They've got a very small percentage of the clubs hold the vast percentage of the revenues, and not necessarily for the benefit of the wider game. Um, you know, this time last year there was massive uh, discussions over rescue packages for the football league, um, and all sorts. Oh God, it won't be in the next 20 years. I think it'll be in the next 5 to 10. Calgary Flames, I think, are the ones in most trouble with what's happened with the Saddle Dome and the plans to build a new arena getting cancelled after much money's been put into planning and designing. Obviously, Arizona obviously want to get the deal in Tempe done, which is another area of the Phoenix metropolitan area, and they are committed to pumping in $1 billion into that. But their arena issues aren't settled either. I think the Senators, the arena isn't bad; it's the location of it. Um, but I think their arena issues are not as bad as Arizona and Calgary. They're the ones that are far more pressing to get an arena sorted. Um, and the NHL was committed to keeping the Coyotes in Arizona. So Calgary, I think, is the one that's more severely pressing, with the complete collapse of that arena deal to build a new one and move out of the Saddle Dome. The Saddle Dome, basically, you could completely refurb it, do a Madison Square Garden, and completely refurb the arena, but they want to build a brand new, purpose-built arena. That it's modern. So, I mean, look, if the Islanders could get an arena situation sorted after their disaster at Barclays, Barclays Arena, anything's possible. But looking at it, I think with the weaker Canadian dollar, like it was 25 odd years ago, we could see a Canadian team relocate. Um, I mean, as a Jets fan, they've lost 80 million in the last 18 months because of the pandemic. And they were hoping to relocate some games to Saskatchewan. And for some reason, some really difficult season ticket holders voted against that proposal, which could have actually earned the team some money and mitigated some of the losses. So that was a bit disappointing, in regards as a Jet. I would like to see the Jets play in front of fans, even though I don't live in Canada. Um, as far as I'm aware, the NHL does not want to relocate any teams. Any. I think because relocation breeds instability within the league, and the league is the most stable it's been for 25 years. Um, Apart from the Thrashers moving, again, that was an arena issue. So the league is very keen not to relocate anyone. Um, and a relocation would actually affect the TV deals they've signed with like ESPN and Bailey Sports, which is the replacement for Fox Sports. Is basically they've signed these this new TV deal, and any relocation would actually then affect the TV deals they put in place. Um, and 2/3 of the owners, unless it really is that we don't have an arena to play in, have to be in favour of relocation because of relocation fees. And then you would have to find a suitable location. Now, the only suitable location, if you want to move the Senators, would have to be Quebec. So you don't have to change the divisions or the conferences. There is already arena there, but Quebec City is a smaller market than Ottawa. That is the problem. And Montreal would be a sticking point for that. And Montreal has a lot of power in the league owners group. So I don't think any team is going to relocate. I think the chances of that are diminishing, and there are other teams with more pressing arena issues than the Senators. The Breton Flats. If Eugene Melnick was to sell the team, I think you might find more progress in regards to a new owner, either coming to an agreement with the city to improve transport links like public transit, like buses and whatnot, and ride share schemes and better transport facilities, and working with the city council to improve that. And again, a new negotiating for development of, let's say, Le Breton Flats or any other location in the Ottawa metropolitan area. I think a new ownership group might assist that, but I can't see the NHL wanting to move the Senators. And I can see their arena issue being more the arena's fine; it's in a poor location. But there are ways to mitigate that if you come to some kind of public transit agreement with the city, and the taxi operators, or cab operators as you would call it, and things like Uber giving discounts on match nights, and various initiatives to be able to get fans to the location without spending a fortune. Um, if that means you have like a special bus route or special bus routes put in place, so fans from other areas of the Ottawa metropolitan area can easily access the arena, because that's been a known issue. There are various initiatives they could do, um, uh, and it's more. I think it's more an issue for visiting fans as well. Those from not from the Ottawa area, who may be Senators fans, maybe other NHL fan bases when their team is in town, like let's say Toronto or Montreal, or some of the American teams, when they're playing interdivision games and such, or when it gets to the playoffs, they find the issues getting to the arena and accessibility a problem as well. Um, so I think there are things the Senators and the local government can do to mitigate some of the accessibility issues. Um, but in regards to getting a new arena built, I think it's less pressing for the Senators than Calgary or Arizona. Um, uh, it's just less pressing. The arena is more modern than the Saddle Dome, and in Arizona's case, it's getting the Tempe deal approved, and making sure that they have an arena to play in until that Tempe deal is hit the ground running, and an arena is available for them. There are other arenas in the Phoenix metropolitan area and Tucson, which where the Roadrunners play, for example, where they could play temporarily while Tempe is developed. Um, but again, all the dialogue coming out of the NHL is they want every team to stay in. They want the Panthers to stay in Florida. They don't want to move them outside Florida. They should move them more closer to central Miami or downtown Miami. But there's no drive to move the Panthers out of Florida. Um, yeah, I don't think the Flames move out of Calgary. It's just getting that, the ownership and sit. I mean, I think both sides, the costs were starting to balloon for the proposed new arena in Calgary, for Saddle Dome. You could do some short to medium term improvements with the Saddle Dome. It's not the oldest NHL arena. Madison Square Garden is, but Madison Square Garden has had regular refurbs every 10 to 15 to 20 years during like the summer. They always do that little bit of work, little bit of work, little bit of work. And yeah, at some point, Madison Square Garden is going to have to be completely redeveloped. At some point, uh, and the Rangers may have to like rink share with the Islanders, for example, at Belmont. Um, Nassau Coliseum basically just wasn't up to modern standards, um, and the Barclays Arena just didn't work for ice hockey. It only works for basketball, and even then, it doesn't fully work. Um, but I the Calgary situation is worrying because of the weak Canadian dollar. That's the issue with all the Canadian teams, with especially with COVID and losses, is the weak Canadian dollar. Now the NHL just does not want to move any teams, and you've got some fans saying, well, no Canadian team's going to win the Stanley Cup again. Attracting free agents. Some of the locations, not great locations. Da, 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 da. And there, it's the economic side. There's a reason why only one WHA franchise is staying in the same location, and that is Edmonton. And the reason for that was Pocklington at the time was one of the wealthiest men in Canada. So at the time they were winning all those Stanley Cups. They could afford to stay, whereas the other Canadian teams started struggling. And we saw the original Jets move. We saw issues around when the Senators first came back to Ottawa, and it was an expansion thing. Um, there were Quebec, the weaker Canadian dollar in the mid '90s, much like now, had a massive impact. The difference between then and now is there's more money in the league. The TV deal is better. There's a salary cap now, so there's cost certainty. There's more money and revenues coming in. The league is bigger, so there's more teams. So therefore, you can justify having a bigger TV deal. Expansion fees. Expansion fees have definitely covered a hole in the league's finances, especially with Seattle. So the league is more financially stable than what it was, and can actually afford to prop up teams that make losses, COVID notwithstanding. The issue is, and the teams that always get told to move are the teams that are struggling at the bottom. Look at Carolina. 5 years ago, moved the team. No one supports it. They're now one of the best teams in the league. Winning helps get fans in the arena. If Arizona, after 2012 had kicked on and made another conference final and consistently made the playoffs, fans would turn up. I have no doubt on that. And without the Coyotes franchise, you don't have Austin Matthews, one of the biggest stars in the game right now. So that's an interesting one. The Evander Kane situation is getting interesting because apparently his agent is saying double-figure numbers of teams. About 10 to 15 teams are interested in signing him as a free agent. And the NHLPA are going to file a grievance against the Sharks in the league for termination of contract. I think they're doing that, dragging their feet. I think it's just a legal formality. I don't think they really follow through with a full grievance procedure and really pushing it. They just have to do the legal formalities because he is an NHLPA member. But as an NHL fan, I don't know if Evander Kane ever plays in the NHL ever again. Slava Voinov hasn't for the Los Angeles Kings after his domestic violence conviction. And that was 8-9 years ago now, 10 years ago now. He hasn't played since. So I don't know with Evander Kane. And Mike Ribeiro hasn't played for several years since entering the substance abuse program and was known as a very difficult locker room character himself. Evander Kane has had so many off-ice dramas, allegations of domestic violence, gambling debts, basically being a bankrupt, owing the tax man millions. I don't think he ever plays in the NHL again. I don't think any team is going to risk the locker room chemistry they have by signing him because he's saying he wants to go to a contender. And if they said the season stopped now because of COVID, and they had a very similar playoff structure to the playing round we had a couple of seasons ago, you could have 24 teams in the playoffs. And that means, any one of 24 teams or 23 teams, because the Sharks would technically be above the playoff line if that was to happen, could want his signature. And I can't see any team risking their team chemistry in the short term to get him to play because there's so much baggage. And you look at the teams he's played for and the cities he's played in, and the teams generally get better after he leaves. Who would have thought? And the damage done and what's been said on and off the record about very bits and pieces. I do believe. Talking about believing is a fundamental difference in how North American teams brand themselves versus European teams. Well, you are in North America. You are, from New York, Dan. I'm from the UK. I'm from the home counties, which is the area surrounding London in England. I think there definitely is. Definitely is. I don't know how to describe. I've done a video on the difference between sport and cultures, where we have a community club, where the club is founded in the community. The fans are more local in the sense that generations of the same family will support the same team. Small towns can have very successful teams in their domestic leagues. When a team builds a new stadium, it's still in the same town, same city. Whereas in the US, Canada, teams relocate all the time because the owner thinks they can make more money in another location, or the current owner's going, I'm selling this team, the new owner wants to move it. Branding wise, I don't know. I think there is. I think there is. Definitely. It's an interesting one how teams brand themselves. Personally, I just watch the sport really. I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. I watch everything online now, pretty much. I don't really, in my pay as much attention to team branding. Generally, it's to do with the new kit being released, the sponsorship deal, how they put big billboards up with players around stadiums and the big clubs. So uh, you'll see near the stadiums and in the big cities and towns and stuff. You will see, let's say, the club shop. You may see a big poster saying Chelsea season tickets. Da, 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 TV adverts for like this is the big game, building up to big games. Um, a few weeks coming up, or a week coming up, like League Cup semi final, FA Cup. I don't know how much different the branding is, but looking at the merchandise I've bought from the North American, like the NFL, um, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, uh, that I own, there is a difference. Not massively, I don't think, with the end product of what you have with the merchandise and such. Um, it's an interesting question. I think it's more to do with the sport and culture is different. Overall, if you've got a good marketing team and a good PR team, um, and you're working with your media partners, you've got good social media presence. There are ways to brand your team or your athletes. There are ways to do it. You will notice a lot of TV adverts with high profile football players in high profile track and field athletes, motorsport. I've seen a lot of TV and billboard adverts with high profile athletes in. Um, they're normally to do with you know sportswear companies, deodorant and toiletries. Oh yes, men's shaving stuff apparently is really popular. Um, you know, ex-sports stars who may have a sports podcast or a radio program or a TV program where they're discussing sports, or a sports panel show, you may see the presenters doing things. Betting companies like getting sport. Neymar is the face of poker stars at the moment. Um, Pepsi has like Messi and some other players who you've got an agreement with Pepsi. Coca Cola has an agreement with some players. Um, Adidas, Nike. So individual. So if let's say Chelsea are sponsored by I think it's Nike or Adidas. I think it's Nike at the moment. So a Nike TV advert may have some Chelsea players in it. An Adidas advert might have some Arsenal players in it. Uh, uh, a toiletry company like a shaving company or a cologne company may be one of the minor sponsors of a team. You may see, so there is ways you can do it if you've got a good marketing team, a good sponsorship arrangement where that's part of your contractual agreements with the players in their contracts where they're allowed to have X amount of personal sponsors. You will see them. Um, we've seen Adidas adverts for David Beckham and Johnny Wilkinson, for example, who were both had personal sponsorship with Adidas at the time they were playing when they were at the top of their game. They did an Adidas advert together. You know, uh, there's been TV advertising is a great way to get the individual players or some of the players in kit as well. So Fly Emirates, Emirates Airways, they sponsor Arsenal. Etihad sponsors Man City. I've seen airline adverts where proud sponsor of insert football club here. Um, Mobile phone networks have sponsored a lot of sports teams, and again they'll say proud sponsor of you know insert sports team here. So there are ways to brand yourself, and I think that obviously happens in North America as well. I know Scotiabank did a funny advert in Canada, which involved the Boston Bruins after their Stanley Cup win with their Canadian players who had signed for that season. So Brad Marchand, Jerome McGinley, and stuff for the 2011-2012 season. They had some funny adverts involving some of the Boston Bruins players, which I found mildly amusing watching them. Burger King have done one with Wayne Gretzky and who was the other player? There was another player they had, Wayne Gretzky. I forget who the other player was, but Burger King. I think it was Sidney Crosby. Did a very good Burger King advert. Um, so uh, again, certain brands in North America do it. So I think I see people wearing Betway shirts and sweatshirts around all the time now. Wild. Yeah, there is a lot of gambling branding when it comes to sports teams, and free giveaways and also. I mean, I've got um, my Blackburn jersey that I have has a betting company. I think it's gone bust now, or it's been bought out or changed its name. But um, in the 2006-2007 season, we were sponsored by Bet24, which is one of the early online betting companies that we had over here in the big wave in the 2000s of the ongoing online gambling and online casinos and all that. Because our gambling laws are been very liberalised for 40, 50 years compared to the US. We're well ahead when it comes to sports gambling and regulation and stuff. Massive, massive online sports betting companies, massive. But in regards to internet sponsorships on betting companies, there's a big push to go against that. And I agree. I think there has to be a point where we're going, hang on a second, we've gone too far. Look at tobacco and alcohol sponsorship. In France, it's illegal to sponsor with alcohol. And of course, the tobacco ban has been in place for donkey's years, apart from F1, snooker, and in fact, motorsport in general got an exemption. The FIA got an exemption because F1 was the big one, but MotoGP, Superbikes, they all got an exemption because Rizzler, I think, still sponsors Suzuki. Because Rizzler not only make rolling cigarette papers, because I have my cigarette tobacco tin, but Rizzler also are a paper pulp manufacturer. Rizzler actually make other industrial papers. So yeah, the ban on tobacco sponsorship, the ban on alcohol sponsorship in France. There are certain things certain companies just aren't allowed by for various regulations. The fact that in North America now they've liberalised the gambling laws, and it depends obviously where you are in the US because certain states haven't actually granted licenses yet for gambling, other than the state lotteries. That in itself is interesting. I'm not a massive fan myself of apart from horse racing, which is heavily reliant on gambling revenues for its revenue and gambling sponsorship as in funding the sport. Apart from horse racing, I'm not keen on it. I'm not keen on the massive amount of adverts I'm seeing, even on YouTube. So let's say, for example, I'm watching because I'm into my history, so I watch a few historical channels that do with metal detecting and archaeology and things like that, documentary channels on YouTube. I will still get the gambling ads popping up. I'm massive into my motorsport, and gambling ads and sponsorship in motorsport is very limited, very, very limited. I might be watching, the IMSA or World Endurance or European Endurance, championships and programs, and I love my, Le Mans and supercars and prototype cars and touring car racing, and I will get the gambling ads just because it's sport. I don't like. I'm not comfortable with it. I know there's growing pressure to reduce the amount of reliance that football, rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, and other sports have on gambling revenue for the advertising and sponsorship. But we'll see what happens. Whether we go the same way as tobacco, we'll wait and see. But that's an interesting question. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not a fan of it. But at the moment, it's not illegal, so I can't say legally it's wrong. I think morally, I think we've gone past what is acceptable in the last 10, 15 years. but it's filling the whole of the tobacco sponsorship. It's filling the whole of the alcohol sponsorship. There are less teams with an alcohol sponsor, like Carlsberg was synonymous with Liverpool, for example. McEwen's Lager is famous for sponsoring um, Blackburn Rovers during the early 90s. Um, so there were certain clubs that had a great association with a brewery or an alcohol firm or a drinks firm, and then they're not now. So um, yeah, I think we'll see. I'm looking forward to the Rugby League World Cup. It's a shame North American Rugby League has fallen through, having a strong USA and Canada. Yes, I think delaying it by a year in hindsight was the right decision. I think it could have been handled better. I understand why the Australians and the New Zealanders pulled out. Being a massive fan of the NRL, they could and should have done it better. And a lot of the media over there are saying we could have handled this better. I understand why they made the decision they did last September. I generally do. I just felt it could have been handled better by all parties because within a week, guess what? We don't have a World Cup. It's pushed back a year, which was option number 4. What is really interesting, and this is what you have to know, is this time last year they were saying we have 4 options on the table: full attendance, partial attendance, no attendance, and working out how much revenue they would make and how much the government would grant them. And the final option is delay it by a year. And they were like, we want to avoid that option. The other 3 are the ones we more likely would like to happen. And obviously, as the year wore on, we had the Euros, we had the Delta spike, then the Omicron. Ironically, it has worked out. Delaying it by a year was the right decision. It's how they came about getting to that decision which did trouble me. I think it was a really bad. No one covered themselves in glory by the way it was delayed. I think delaying it in the end was the right decision, but it could have and should have been handled better. And a decision should have been made a lot earlier when it was clearly obvious that either we have reduced or no attendance at all and just play the games, or delay it by a year. Should have been discussed a lot sooner than what it was when it came to making that final decision. But yes, it is a shame what's happened with the North American Rugby League and the breakdown there. I haven't really read too much about it. I just know it hasn't succeeded, which is a massive, massive shame. But look at the Ottawa races and the mess that happened there. Look at the Toronto Wolfpack. There are issues in making the game sustainable in the short, even to medium term. And I do think getting the Australian Rugby League Commission and the RFL to work together, but there are issues with governance anyway in the big leagues. So to get a new league started from scratch, it was going to be a long struggle anyway. But it is nice to see an American wanting to watch rugby league. That is really just really great to hear, really great to see. And I don't know what the broadcast rights are over in the US and Canada for the Rugby League World Cup, but because it's an international tournament and it's a World Cup, I think it'll get a lot of interest. A lot of interest, and it finishes before the Football World Cup, so that will give a lot of interest, I think, to those sports fans who don't like the NFL, who don't like the NHL, but like contact sports. So I do think there's going to be a proportion of sports fans over in the US and Canada who aren't interested in the Super Bowl, aren't interested in the Stanley Cup, who will look at this and go, "Oh, hang on a second, I can pencil that into my diary." And we'll see what happens. I hope it's a good tournament. I'm finding at the moment. I'm not going to name names of betting companies, but there's a certain one with Ray Winston that keeps coming up quite frequently, and another one with what is his name? He was in Children of Men, and he's a really good actor, and he was in The Bourne Identity as one of the assassins who dies on the farm. 2 very famous British actors. One of them is I've forgotten his name. With another betting company that used to sponsor Fulham. Remember that used to sponsor Fulham. They keep regularly coming up, and they are really infuriating because half of them are unskippable, which is really, really annoying. And then there's another very famous one, um, which is one of the minor sponsors of the Brisbane Broncos. So I'm really giving it away here. without naming them. That again, really infuriating. Um, and they're unskippable. Whereas if it's on the TV, I can just change the channel and just channel hop while the ads are on. Can't can't do that on YouTube necessarily, and it is absolutely infuriating. And I'm sure it's infuriating for creators as well who are not necessarily in favour of gambling. Yeah, I think they could complement each other because you're sort of trying to recruit from the same talent pool, um, and rugby union is really working really well in the US and Canada. It really is with Major League Rugby. Rugby league side of things, it's unfortunate how it's all panned out. The Otter races having to go back to the UK, um, the for relocate a second time, and the Wolfpack collapsing. I think that's damaged the efforts to get a domestic North American league professional off the ground. Um, but there are massive organisational problems and money issues. And to start a league from scratch, look how many attempts it took rugby union. It took 2 attempts to get rugby union to work. It took 2 attempts to get um, Major League Soccer because there was a previous league as well, North American football. It took a bit of failure before a successful league came along, and you know, you've got rugby league does not have the same international imprint that rugby union and football do. But I do believe it'd be more appealing to the North American audience than rugby union. Now, ironically, I think that the North American fans would find it easier to follow, easier to learn, and buy into the sport. And I do know from several North American, especially US YouTubers, who during the lockdown in 2020, and when the NRL was the first really major, I think it was not the first league to come back. I think the Korean Baseball League actually was first, but the first globally recognised league of a high standard that came back that has international TV deals. Um, it caught the imagination, as did the AFL, and the Americans especially were like, "Oh, there's sport to watch," and the viewership figures in North America skyrocketed, and then you got the Pat McAfee podcast for picking up the NRL and AFL, and they had picked teams to follow and discuss and talk about, and it really just um, you know, shot up the viewership figures, and it's maintained them. It hasn't just a brief little blip; it has actually maintained those viewership figures. So, in that regard, rugby league has started to get an imprint in North America. So I think there is a desire from fans to, see games actually, in the US on a more regular basis, have a professional setup. I think we'll see what happens in the coming years. We'll see with the rebound we're going to get coming out of this pandemic economically, what's going to happen, because you need money to get it off the ground. And this World Cup and the one in France are going to be key, I believe, in growing the game in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in North America, because the time difference, they're going to be able to watch a lot of games live. I think that's going to be key. And I think possibly after France, if the US and Canada were to joint host a World Cup, I think that could be massive as well. Definitely get a World Cup in the US and Canada, like the Football World Cup. I think that could be a massive boost for the sport, and help get a domestic professional league off the ground. The same with the Rugby Union World Cup as well. I think they definitely have the infrastructure in place, and definitely fans will watch that. If 100,000 people can go to Soldier Field and watch Ireland beat the All Blacks, admittedly in 2016, I think it is doable. Definitely doable. You want to see the best players play. So getting a World Cup, I think, or bidding for a World Cup could definitely put the foundations. It's the same with the '94 World Cup. The reason why they were awarded that was they were going to set up the MLS as part of the bidding process. They said, we're going to have the MLS, we're going to have a professional league, we're going to grow the game professionally in the US, and they've done that. It took 10 years for the MLS to really establish itself and stabilise. But look at Major League Rugby. No teams have had to relocate yet, and they're expanding every year. So if they were to get either code of rugby as a World Cup at some point, definitely that'd be a massive shot in the arm for both codes, and the interest and the growth. The infrastructure is already in place. It's just getting the money together to put a bid in, because there is no doubt in my mind that it could succeed. I don't necessarily think either would be more viable than the other. I think rugby union is now professionally established in North America and is growing. They've got a university program now where they're drafting from universities. So I think either could work. We've seen good crowd numbers when the big European and Southern Hemisphere teams have gone over and had off-season games there, internationals, good crowds. So I do think it's doable. It's getting the marketing right. It's attracting the audience. And look, Dan, I mean, look, he's from upstate New York, not too far from Albany and Buffalo, and he's looking forward to it. So if you can get a non-rugby fan, he's a baseball fan, is Dan in the chat. If you can get a baseball fan to go, a hardcore baseball fan to buy in and look forward to a tournament, then in 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 my opinion, it look what Japan did at the last World Cup, and look how that's winning that bidding process, and then the progression the Japanese have made to basically tier one nation status in less than a decade. It is doable, and the infrastructure is in place. Yes, a Rugby League World Cup is cheaper to host. However, and I will say this, it doesn't have the same international footprint that rugby union does for getting eyes on the game. Now, if you were to have a World Cup in the US, Rugby League World Cup, that would be amazing, because I have no doubt that American fans would definitely buy it. Yes, now baseball. What I've read is that they are hoping to have talks resume at some point this month, but it doesn't look likely before February now. I've read different reports saying February at the earliest before talks resume. Um, Major sticking point is obviously the luxury tax side of things, and length of contract and arbitration status, free agency, and minimum term of contract and minimum salary. And the fact that a salary cap is not on the table at this stage, I don't think it's too far away before Major League Baseball has to adopt it, because the luxury tax system is clearly not working. Um, the economics of baseball are really confusing. I can't get my head around them. I really can't. Eh, Absolute shambles. When it should be taking place in October and November this year. So the same time slot as last year. They're more concerned this year because of the Football World Cup. So it ends a week before the Football World Cup starts, basically, in order so there's no TV clash, because obviously the big broadcasters want to have the rights to the World Cup. They want to maximise the TV advertising revenue overseas. Of course, domestically, our national broadcaster, the BBC, has got sole rights. So trying to sell the TV rights, they want to avoid a clash with the Football World Cup in Qatar, for a variety of reasons. And the rescheduled tournament will not clash with the World Cup in Qatar for football. Yes, Major League Baseball is a league on decline. The fan base is aging and shrinking, and the average fan is technically older than your average sports fan generally. And then you compare the average age of fans of baseball to the other major leagues in the US and Canada, plus the other, high-profile leagues and sports in Europe and Australia. The average age is older, and the fan base is shrinking year on year. Um, I think the average age of a fan in Major League Baseball is 5 years above the average age of a sports fan. The average age of a fan in attendance, again, is above the average age of a sports fan. I think a survey was done by English Football, and the average fan age in attendance is 34 to 50. So if the average age, so give or take, in that bracket, if the average age for a baseball fan is 5 years above the average age of your average sports fan in attendance, an average fan watching on the TV, you're looking at 40 to 55. It is still a massive fan base, yes, but it is aging and shrinking, and younger fans are switching off. They're not going to games. They're not, buying the Major League Baseball packages, TV packages, TV deals. They're not, downloading the app. They're doing it less. It is noticeable that there is a decline in uptake in season ticket holders, merchandise sales, across the board. Younger fans are feeling priced out. So then you have to ask the question about ticket pricing at games. Um, and of course, the amount of games Major League Baseball plays in a season is double that of what the NHL does. And to go to every single home game is like a whole season of NHL. So yeah, ticket pricing, season ticket pricing, match day tickets. You just want to turn up at, let's say, Fenway Park and buy a ticket for the day. Um, it is there's a massive um, financial outlay to be a fan. And the wages, I mean, the average salary is lower now than what it was, but the highest salaries have gone up. So your average player is earning less, but the highest salaries are higher. So that's something to consider as well. So there's massive economic imbalance in the league. And 2 days before the lockout was announced, at the end of November, beginning of December, there were signed these massive free agent contracts and contract extensions for those players who were off contract. And then 2 days later, oh yeah, we're going to lock them out. Economic reasons. So there's a lot at play there. Both sides are negotiating bad faith or not negotiating at all. I think one of the meetings between all the team executives and the Players Association lasted less than 7 minutes. I think the last meeting was 7 minutes long, from all attendees arriving to the, the talks breaking down. So I think the commissioner is the wrong guy to be commissioner. I think both sides are coming out of this looking really bad, and it's a PR disaster for the league. So the Major League Baseball head office is their media department is there. I feel sorry for anyone who has to work for Major League Baseball and the teams right now, and the player reps and them, negotiators and those working for the Players Association on the admin side. I feel sorry for the employees of the sport, other than the players and the owners. Um, I do feel sorry for them in this regard, because this situation is dragging on. Um, oh, look, Manfred, until the Astros scandal, I didn't really pay, and the London series a few years back, I didn't really pay much attention to Major League Baseball. But I thought, because they're bringing a series to London, and want to invest in bringing games to London every season for a few years. I think it was 2 to 4 years they were planning. Initially 2 years, and then they would think about how successful it would be, and then bringing them back like the NFL. Um, then I thought, you know what, I'll do some videos on it. I'll look at the history, and then I looked at the history of labour unrest within the league, and then I looked at this current lockout. How they've not had strikes and lockouts from the mid-90s till now is beyond me, because every CBA is just a sticking plaster over the problems that were there in '95, that were there in 1990. They've never solved the issues economically the league is facing. They just kick it down the road. They kick it down the road. You know, we'll deal with the problem in 5 years, or however long the CBA lasts. We'll deal with it in the next CBA negotiation. Oh, next one, and that lies with the Players Association and the league owners, the team owners, just fudging the CBA for so long. And the issues aren't resolved. There's a lack of trust between the players and the owners, and there has been since the 70s. And there's a lot of negotiating in bad faith. There's a lack of compromise from both sides. You've got to give a little to, you've got to give a lot to, give a little to earn a lot, basically, is what my dad used to teach me. No, I'm not interested in the Baseball World Classic. I'm not a baseball fan. I just cannot enjoy. I will casually watch a game. Don't get me wrong. I just cannot get invested in it. The same with basketball. It's a great league. The NBA is a great league. It's a great sport. For me, it just doesn't excite me. Um, I don't feel that it's a sport for me. I prefer the contact sports. I prefer the contact team sports like rugby union, rugby league, and ice hockey. I prefer motorsport where there are accidents. There's crazy overtakes. There's you know rallying and motocross and there are other sports that interest me more. The sports that have more danger and more risk to them. It's the best way to describe it. Um, so yeah, basketball and baseball don't really appeal to me. I'm not saying they're bad sports, not at all. Anyone who's a baseball, I mean, I've got friends who play, rec baseball over here, like playing in the amateur UK league, like and are part of the team, and they love it. And fair play to them. They even have a mixed men's and women's team in my local community. Fair play to them. More for good for you. That's great. For me, though, it's not a sport I can actually enjoy. I can't feel invested in it. Um, do I like Test cricket? Yes, I do like Test cricket. And some of my favourite players of all time are Australian. Um, I'm a massive Brett Lee fan. Always was as a kid. Jason Gillespie, massive Jason Gillespie fan, and what he's done for the English county game as a coach and as a player as well, what he's done in the game in England. I have a lot of time for Jason Gillespie. Um, I've got a lot of time for Brett Lee, as in watching them and then listening to their interviews and their style of play. Um, really massive fans of. They're two of my favourite cricketers of all time, and they're Aussies, and they used to beat us in the Ashes all the time. And then that one year we beat them, 2005. Um, I'm the state of cricket, however, troubles me, and that's not just an England problem. That's the Test game in general, and the ICC, and a lot of the issues that cricket's facing: corruption, match fixing scandals, player scandals, off-field scandals, administration issues, TV rights problems. Um, but yes, I do like you know Test cricket. I like cricket in general. I used to play at school. I really enjoyed watching it when I can. I think the standard, the quality of cricket is not as good as what it was 20 years ago. I think a lot of sports you could say that, but that's again a personal opinion. Not everyone's going to agree with that. Some people may think the standard's gone up. Um, but this current England side are making an average Australian side look world class. The fact we're celebrating drawing the fourth test and just getting over the line and batting out the day's play, and the last three batsmen, Leach, Broad, and Anderson, basically dragging England to a draw. That for me is a problem. The preparation for this Ashes for both sides was beset with off-field scandal, for a variety of different reasons, obviously well documented. Um, so yeah, I think cricket's in crisis. I do. I wouldn't say the bowling's necessarily improved either. I would say the overall standard is slightly less. But the standard of the shorter formats has definitely improved. Um, but I would say the overall standard of play, I think, is slightly less. And you could argue the IPL may have had an impact. Um, and now the all-round 12 months a year game where players are just overplaying in all the competitions, like the shorter formats and the longer formats of the game. I think players are being overplayed, which is having a massive impact on their mental and physical health, which then will have an impact on the field. Um, you know, what Jimmy Anderson and Glenn McGrath have done in the game for their longevity, and Glenn McGrath was a great bowler in his time, and Jimmy Anderson beating his fast bowler wicket record. Admittedly, it took more tests to do it, but they're the two best fast bowlers the game has ever seen. Um, I don't think. I think McGrath stays second overall for fast bowler, seam bowler wickets. And I think Jimmy Anderson's record, he'll continue to add to that. And I don't think he gets beaten. I think Stuart will be the third all time. I think he is the third all time fast bowler. Um, someone might challenge him for his wicket totals. But they're the three best fast bowlers for wickets taken. Although you could argue Dale Steyn on his day was absolutely unplayable. Lasith Malinga on his day was absolutely unplayable, but didn't play as many tests and therefore didn't take as many wickets, but almost unplayable at times. Brett Lee, one of the fastest of all time. You know, Wasim Akram, possibly the greatest technician as a fast bowler. Um, you know, any of the West Indian fast bowlers of the 90s. There are some. I mean, one of my favourite players is Ryan Sidebottom, criminally underplayed at Test level, but injuries did hamper him. Um, Jofra Archer has the ability, I think, to take 250, maybe 300 Test wickets if he stays fit, maybe 400. So definitely could challenge some of the records that these great bowlers have put up. Um, but I don't think we see the likes of a Jimmy Anderson or a Glenn McGrath ever again, or a Brett Lee, um, or a Dale Steyn. That standard of pace bowling, I don't think we see their likes ever again, because players are overplaying. Players are playing too much. And while cricket is not necessarily as physical as some other sports, there's great lulls where it's just the bowler and the batsman just going at it. Um, and there's a lot of sedentary play, especially in Test cricket. If the batsman's just blocking everything, and they've got the spin bowlers in for 20, 30 over spells, or the slower pace, medium paces. Um, in general, players are playing too much. I have concerns about the mental side, but also the physical side, especially of some of the fast bowlers, and some of the out and out batsmen who take some big blows to the body and the arms and the legs and the feet. There are some nasty injuries in cricket when you get hit. Yeah, and Jofra Archer, I think he's very very young. He's a raw talented player. Same with the Curran brothers, and yes, he's had a lot more injuries than other players of his age. Again, is he being overplayed? Um, you know, he's played a lot of cricket in a very short space of time at a high intensity level. And you could argue, is it his technique, his bowling technique? Does he have a genetic issue? Because some players do. It ends up turning me, oh, you have a genetic issue where you have weaker joints, or you're not healing properly from muscular tears or ligament damage. Dale Steyn, his career petered out because of repeat shoulder and elbow injuries. Brett Lee, he had some injuries as well. Darren Goff, his knees are destroyed, which curtailed his Test career. Darren Goff was a brilliant bowler, and now he's director of cricket at Yorkshire. I think he's the right guy to turn that ship around and fix a lot of the problems structurally that Yorkshire has that led to the scandal that they got engulfed in. So yeah, for me, we're seeing a lot of players struggle with the mental side of the game, but the physical side of it, while it's not as physical as rugby union or rugby league or ice hockey, where some players unfortunately retire before they're 25 because of some really brutal injuries. In football as well, we're seeing a lot of players, calling it quits for because of injury before the age of 30. Um, yeah, I do have some concerns about players in general. The fact that players like Jacques Callis and Adam Gilchrist played as long as they did, in all formats, is ridiculous. I don't think we see a Jack Callis again as an all-rounder, or an Adam Gilchrist as a wicketkeeper batsman. Even if he's playing in the shorter formats, I don't think we see that type of player or that longevity of career. And they were true gentlemen of the game. Um, I just don't see it happening. I think the modern game is there's just too many games. Um, and now you add the 100 into the mix. Player welfare, that's gone out the window completely. Um, and that is a concern for me. And a sport that I love, I think, yeah, the quality. And it's the same with football. I think they're playing too many games. Look at the amount of injuries in football the last 2 years, or last year and a half, because obviously COVID shut down the 2019-2020 season for a long period. But injuries are through the roof across all European leagues. Injuries are through the roof. They're unable to field teams, and in years past, that's a forfeit if you're unable to name a team. But you've got the COVID excuse. So we need to have a couple of positive tests as well as injuries, and then you can get away with it. Because otherwise, I think the footballing authorities realise they've got the squad rules wrong for squad numbers. I think we're going to see some rule changes in regards um, squad numbers and size of squads. I think that's going to have to change, because while I don't think the FA in England, for example, the Premier League and the Football League will allow seasons not to be completed or teams not to fulfil their fixture list, it's getting close. It's a possibility. I don't think it happens, but it is a possibility that is out there, that we just cannot fulfil the fixture list because of the cancellations. Um, and shoehorning games in. I have concerns about player welfare later on in the season when we're shoehorning so many games in the last couple of months of the season. And then you've got to feel for the fans because that's a lot of games that, if you want to get your fans to pack up the stadiums, you could have 3 games in a week at home. It's ridiculous. No, I don't think you should split T20 and one day and Test cricket into different sports. It's just length of game. As long as the basic rules are the same, I would get rid of the power play overs and field restriction overs in T20 and one days, and just play it like you would play Test cricket, just a shorter format of it. The 100, no, I'm not a fan. The 100 doesn't help anyone. It's the ECB as a governing body coming up with a gimmick because they're reacting to the fact that viewership figures are down, revenues are down, and TV figures are down even when games are on free to air. They are lower than what they were in 2005 when we last had free to air cricket. It is a reactionary idea that appears to be done by some TV executives high on cocaine and with some hookers, because that's the joke I make, because that seems like a very 80s, 90s idea that you get in America. A sport with gimmicks is a sport in crisis. That is my opinion. A sport full of gimmicks is a sport in crisis. And what we've seen in the last 20 years is a massive drive for T20 and one days. But I like one day cricket. I like 50 over cricket. I think it's the perfect format, personally. T20, I find it short, sharp, and exciting. Just get rid of the power play overs and the field restriction overs. Please. Just make it a shorter format of one day, which is in itself a shorter format of Test cricket. Get rid of those gimmicky power play overs. You've got the perfect sport. It's just a shorter format. I think they need to enforce the slow run rate rule, really enforce it, and actually find those teams and countries that deliberately have got a slow run rate and slow over rate. I think, well, not run rate, but over rate. Speed up the game, like properly, like dock them 5 runs, add 5 runs to the opposition, the batting team, as punishment at the end of the innings. For each time you've been warned about slow over rate as the bowling team, that's 5 runs added. Next morning, that's 10 runs added to the final score that you've got to chase down. I think that needs to be put in as a punishment, because then you just made it harder for your team to win the game, especially in one day and T20. That would definitely, if that was a punishment for a slow over rate from the bowling side, you'll suddenly see coaches go, we can't really drag it out. We need to speed up the attack. We need to get this team out quicker. We need to, therefore, if we get the team out quicker, we've got a lesser target to chase. If you're batting second, I don't want to see a schism in cricket. I just need. I think we need to streamline it a little bit and make proactive changes to the sport. They're very simple little fixes. Very simple little fixes. Force, properly punish the slow over rate from the bowling side by adding, first time you won, it's five runs extra to the batting side that's batting. Then it's 10 runs extra, then 15, then 20, and you just keep adding it, and then they will very, very quickly go, oh, we've got a bat next, we've got a bigger target now, we've got an extra 20 runs, and we've got, let's say, it's the final day of a test, you've got all day to bat, let's say that's 100 overs, let's say. That 20 runs difference could be the difference between you winning the test, losing the test, or drawing the test. And if you're trying to retain a series or win a series, if it's a T20, that 20 runs difference is massive. That's like, the follow-on, for example, enforcing the follow-on or batting to avoid the follow-on. That is a massive deficit to add on. So yeah, a rule like that might definitely change speed up the speed of play in Test cricket and maybe one day cricket to an extent. Get rid of the power play overs and the field restriction overs because they just infuriate me. Because that's another little gimmick to try and increase, runs and all that. And if a bowler bowls 3 or 4 extras in an over, he can't bowl for the rest of the game because he's proven he's not capable of bowling at a high enough standard. At which point that reduces your bowling lineup and who you can actually choose to bowl, which then puts pressure on the bowling team to be more accurate. And extras piss me off. At the top level, you shouldn't be bowling wides, no balls, leg byes. That's really poor cricket. Yes, this England performance is making an average Australia side look world class. That's how bad it is. But we are not losing 5-0. It's not Pommy Shambles. Pommy Shambles Mark II with an upgrade. Yeah, I think Joe Root should go as captain. I think Ben Stokes has even said he's got no interest in becoming full-time captain, and assuming the captaincy, he's got no interest, which worries me as vice captain if he has no interest in setting the field, team discussions, because he's actually said on the record, I have no interest in being captain. Um, I don't enjoy, and he's basically said he has no interest. So when you're the vice captain, you have to step in. If the captain goes down injured in the series, you have to step up. So let's say Joe Root didn't recover from his stomach strain because he had to leave the field at times, and let's say he missed the third and fourth test. Ben Stokes is now officially captain, and he says he's got no interest in team discussions. He's not really. That worries me. And he's not going to be bowling in the fifth test. He's just there as a specialist batsman, which is another worry for our bowling depth because he's not fully fit, which is ridiculous. So there's definitely a leadership vacuum. I think Silverwood, when we managed to get a draw without him. With him in the side, we won one test match all year out of the tests we played in the calendar year. Worst year on record for a test side. Even sides like Ireland and Zimbabwe, right, and Bangladesh have won more test matches in a 12-month period than we have. That is absolutely shambolic and should not be happening. That we are the worst test team in the 12-month period from January the 1st to December the 31st last year. That is for me, coach has got to go. Captain and vice captain have got to go from those roles. I mean, yeah, as players, they're brilliant. Ben Stokes has got too much baggage off the field for me to be an appropriate captain. He said he's got no interest in replacing Joe Root, which says to me, okay, the captain and vice captain got to go from those roles, and possibly the team. Joe Root doesn't strike me as a very authoritative captain. He's like a schoolboy. He's like, teacher's pet schoolboy, the nerd who, wants to please everyone. He doesn't look like a ruthless individual. He is a proper tough guy, but he's also a fucking knob. There, I said it. My opinion is he's an absolute arsehole off the field. He's had so many scandals off the field. He's had legal issues. He's had some social media stuff that doesn't look good. I know cancel culture think how far back do we go, but he has, mocked the disabled, people of minorities, gays. Come on. And with what's happened with the Yorkshire scandal and the Essex scandal, especially Yorkshire, I don't think Ben Stokes is the guy to be a leader. He may lead by example at the wicket or in the field or with the ball in hand or with the bat, but he said he's not interested in being a leader. He says he doesn't enjoy team meetings and discussing setting the field and tactics and lineup. And as a vice captain, you have to be the right hand man to the captain. You have to be an advisory to the captain. Well, he got in a fight with two squaddies, and there was alleged homophobic abuse, and he got off with it. But had he been charged with GBH or ABH, he's gone to prison because he was charged with a fray. It's a legal thing. It's harder to prove in a court of law. They have a lower percentage of conviction. He was charged with the wrong offence. A fray is another way of saying assault, basically. But you've got actual bodily harm, grievous bodily harm, assault with intent. Various levels of violent, fighting offences. He didn't beat up some homosexuals. It was the whole situation. They were on international duty. They breached curfew. Alex Hales' career's gone down the toilet. He doesn't cover himself in glory in that incident either. The whole thing, it was trial by social media, which didn't help. But it did change my opinion of Ben Stokes. I was like, well, he's already had a few social medias. Yeah, well, So if your captain goes down injured or ill, the vice captain has to assume that responsibility, and then obviously they will have to find someone else to be vice captain. Should the stand-in obviously have to leave the field for treatment or whatever. And he just, you just look at what he said. I have no interest. And then he mentioned how he doesn't really enjoy that sort of role, and so therefore, yeah, he's got to go. He's part of the leadership group. In cricket, which is much different to other sports, the captain and vice captain are an extension of the coaching team. They have a big say on selection of players. They've got a big say on tactics. Should we bowl first? Should we bat first? Do we declare? Do we enforce the follow on? All these sort of things. All these sort of setting the field, players. They've got a big say on that. And for someone in his position to say, "I'm not really interested," it doesn't. It's I don't enjoy that side of the game. Well, then why are you named vice captain then? If for no other reason, and I don't think Ben Stokes is as popular in the locker room as is claimed. I don't think, for example, Joe Root is necessarily got the backing of every single player on the team. I don't think that is a happy locker room because you can have a poor run of form, but everyone's still buying in. It's held by the body language. The body language is telling me a lot. There is definitely divisions within that locker room. There's divisions within that squad. Um, there's, I mean, the fact that Moeen Ali, for example, retired from Test cricket 6 months ago, I think, 5 months ago. It was in the build-up of the Ashes. For me, was a massive concern for our batting depth, which has been proven to be not there. He's also a very good bowler. Not the best, but he's good. And he's a solid spin bowler. He's a solid all-rounder. He's not outstanding. He's not on Sam Curran levels of explosive batting. He's not on, Ben Stokes levels of clutch bowling. But to lose that all-rounder depth, batting, fielding, and bowling, didn't help, which says to me that something wasn't right. And yeah, his form had been a bit up and down, and he's been heavily criticised in the media, which I think has a part to play. But him stepping away, I think, was a big thing, and he's still got years left in his career. Um, and yeah, the lack of certainty about our openers and our upper order is a concern. Constantly rotating them, not just to give them a go. Give them a 12-month period. You're the opener for this calendar year, unless you're injured. Figure it out. Giving them a run as a combination and just tell the lads figure it out. And then if they've got some technique issues, coach them better. There's a coaching failure there by throwing guys under the bus. In regards to captain's extension, yeah, they are. The captain is team meetings when it comes to leadership meetings.